been some spore crawlers put down, I think, at the natural. Yeah, there's a spore crawler there, and a spire actually going up. EG.IdRA is going to claim his 4th base for his honour, and he is getting missile attacks 1, which will help with the Hydralisks greatly, because Hydras already do a lot of damage to start with, but with level 1 upgrades, everything just goes so much easier. However, there is armor coming on the way for Minigun, and Minigun already has +1 weapons, which is going to do quite well on his zealots, because it means they can now 2-shot Zerglings instead of 3-shot them. But EG.IdRA is going to be working on his creep spread slightly. It's not as fast as some players, but it is definitely solid. But we do have the Hydras going to try and move into Minigun's 3rd, and the cannon does get cancelled, I think that was. But 7 gates at the moment for Minigun, so he should be able to get a warp in. Photon Overcharge was used on the Nexus, but it looks as though he's going to try and EG.IdRA is going to try and move in towards the natural and try and get a good angle. Almost kills the probe, but he will back on out of there, because Hydras are, even though they do a ton of damage, they are really quite fragile. They're like DTs, except you can get billions of them and they're not cloaked. And they're not really like DTs at all in that respect, for what a DT is used for. But they can be used to great effect against any sort of army, as long as you don't really have Colossi, or if they do have Colossi, you have Vipers. Because as a Protoss player, it pains me to watch the games where there are tons of Hydras and Colossi just get pulled into the Hydras every single time. But there is Blink on the way, so we might be seeing some Blink Stalker pressure from Minigun. But the gateways might go down, the cannon does go down, and their force fields do trap about 3 Hydras, I think that was. And that Hydra's actually going to get away with it. So I don't know what he could have finished that Hydra off. I'm not sure why he didn't. But 2 more gates are on the way, as well as extended thermal lance, so Colossi are going to come out and possibly start countering what we are going to be seeing. But Mutalisks are on the way, so EG.IdRA is going to switch up his tech, as well as get flyer upgrades. So looks as though he's definitely committing to air for the time being, as well as getting his 5th base off the back of his pressure into the 3rd. But it looks as though there is going to be a pack of Mutas, or a flock of Mutas, pushing in, and Blink Stalkers are going to drive that away for now. But I don't think he got much damage done there. I think a few pros might have been killed, but if I can remember the units lost tab, I've not observed for such a long time. So Control R, I thought it was Control U, but it's going to be 5 workers killed for EG.IdRA, but the gate is unpowered, so that was presumably one side effect of the Muta harass. He managed to depower a couple of gateways. The observer is going to spot the flock of Mutas and the gaggle of Hydralisks moving in towards the natural, and we are going to see the Mutas try and focus down the Colossi, but the Colossi are doing an incredible amount of damage, and Minigun actually managed to save 1 Colossi. The Mutas are dropping because of the blink forwards, and that Colossi is the luckiest Colossus alive. 3 hit points. It must have had its robotic heart in its mouth. But if we look at the resources lost, EG.IdRA is definitely behind, but he does have extra mining bases, I think. His income is a tiny bit higher on both fronts, as well as his harvest account, so he is going to be ahead, definitely, in that regard. And also, Zerg, it is easier to remax on Zerg. Protoss is probably the slowest to max, I'd say. Terran's the middle maxer, and Storm is on the way as a complete non sequitur, but it is going to be quite useful if he decides to clump up his if EG.IdRA decides to clump up his units, which is basically what he's done with his Mutas. And they are going to try and move in, but Blink Stalkers and an Archon, and there are 2 cannons building, so that should drive away. But there is going to be a fairly big engagement at the 3rd. He's not actually focused. He's focused on one Colossus, but it's not the Colossus that was easiest. 2 Colossus do go down, and the blink forward takes out couple of Mutalisks, I think that was. But I think that Minigun came out of that slightly ahead. Actually, no, I think IdrA might have, because he lost a lot. He lost fewer units, but I think there were more Hydras out. And oh, that's a cheeky pylon. And the fourth is going to be seen. And there's a storm on top of the Mutas. Fairly good storm. And there's another storm. Oh, so many Mutas go down. And it looks as though the good force field's holding back quite a lot of those roaches, which could deal quite a lot of damage to the Stalkers. There's the blink forward, picking off some of the straggling roaches. And IdrA is forced to back away. IdrA has very little army, and that observer is going to get taken out at a slight loss. But it looks as though it's just going to be a tiny bit of vomiting creep up here. And IdrA is going to try and defend what I presume will be his 6th base, if he actually decides to get one in this game. Hallucinated Colossus actually going to be employed for now. Try and trick him into focusing it instead of the other non-existent Colossus. But the roaches are going to get focused down, which is part of the reason why they're in the composition. They're the tanks, and then the Hydras sit behind there and shoot at it. But IdrA actually has a superior concave, and there are no Colossi to actually help deal damage for Minigun. And it looks as though he will be driven back. His 4th base should be cancelled. There's the cancel, and IdrA managing to deny that 4th base. And the pylon is going to actually stay up. I thought it was under attack for a sec there. But it looks as though IdrA is going to continue making spore crawlers just to defend against this warp prism, which I don't think has done much damage in this game. But ultras are on the way for IdrA, so a slight tech switch up, possibly making the blink stalkers slightly redundant, because I don't think they do very much damage. They do slightly more damage against armoured, but against ultralisks, I think that well, air's a better choice to start with, because ultralisks can't really fight air unless... There was a cool idea posted on Reddit, I think a good while ago, I think probably 6 months ago, about if you could have an Overlord use its tentacles to carry an ultralisk around and use that to attack air units. And also using, I think it was if you neuraled a medevac, you could pick up Thors. But there's the Viper in the composition, presumably going to try and pick up the Colossi and bring them into the Vipers. But it looks as though IdrA might go for a dual-pronged, or oh no, he is just going to move straight in. There's a time warp. Good storms employed, killing a lot of units. There's the blink backwards, and it looks as though the ultralisks are going to get focused down pretty effectively. I think the Hydra just died straight off the bat, and the Colossi are both going to survive. The Archon is surviving on about 3 hit points, because they only have 10 hit points to begin with. And IdrA just completely denied there, losing quite a lot of units. And if we look at the units lost tab, IdrA has lost 6,000 or so more. No, that's yeah, 6,000 more units than Minigun, which is a pretty big amount. It's about 1 full base of minerals, I think. No, half a base of minerals. However, he does have quite a few mining bases. The harvester count isn't much different to what it was, but there is a lot of minerals getting brought in by IdrA. 2,000 a minute, I believe that is. And that's a blizzard minute, not a standard minute, which is confusing. But Lings are going to be coming in to tank up some damage. And here are the storms. Some of them are okay, managing to catch a lot of Lings. There's the blink backwards. But are there too many ultralisks here for IdrA? And looks like they're going to get focused down pretty well, but Colossi aren't too good at close range, and it looks as though that one Colossi is going to just make it out. Minigun is on top of keeping his Colossi alive, but his 4th is going to get pretty badly harassed here with the ultralisk in the mineral line. It's not quite as bad as a Ling run by, but it still should do fair amount of damage, and it is 24 workers killed to IdrA, so that's about 1,200 minerals in supply. Minerals that have been used on probes, and have not seen the light of day, at least not for too long. EG.IdrA actually going to get his 6th base down in front of Minigun's main, so I don't know how good that would be for drops if you load up here and go in there, but it looks as though there will be a few stalkers trying to push back creep, and that's actually quite a lot of active tumors, so EG.IdrA definitely wanting to push into Minigun's side of the map with his creep, beginning to get up quite a decent spread, and the observer is going to be checking out, seeing where the creep is and whether these rocks have been pushed down, because that can be quite a good retreat alleyway if used. But the creep is going to start getting denied, and it looks as though Minigun wants to move out and possibly take the game, or no, it looks as though he's just trying to deny creep. The army is on the way up by the looks of it for EG.IdrA, and just taking out that observer just give the element of uncertainty to Minigun, so he does not know what is going to go on. But I think we will have a fairly big engagement. EG.IdrA looks as though he's posturing slightly. The Vipers are in the composition, and here we go. EG.IdrA going to try and position himself, splitting up his Ultralisks, and looks as though he's going to go for it. Yes, he is. Will he be able to get decent abducts down? There's the Blinding Clouds. Abducts one Colossus, and all the Colossi survive. The Archons are dealing a good amount of damage to the Ultralisks, and all the Ultralisks go down. The Hydras all fall, and the EG.IdrA saying, okay, well, and it looks as though Minigun might have seized the battle, and EG.IdrA lost. No GG, but it's EG.IdrA, what do you expect? So that was a pretty good game from Minigun. He played quite well, played quite defensively, and I think EG.IdrA's constant attacking wasn't possibly the best. He might have been, well, I suppose it was the only thing he could really do, but he should, in my opinion, he probably should have tried to go more for Mutalisks in the mineral line, and just generally harassing in, well, general. But that's the first Hotscast that I've ever done. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next game. Hello everybody, this is Nian here, and I am here with my first Hotscast ever. I had to take a bit of a break, well, quite a long break from casting, but I am now back in the chair, and I'm going to be casting a replay between ROOT.Minigun as the Protoss, and as our Zerg player it is going to be EG.IdrA, and both of these players are quite storied with each other. They play each other on a regular basis, and from what I've seen, quite often there tends to be a bit of a flame war, so we might see a bit of that. But it looks as though both players are going to be opening up standard. Minigun has put the pylon down here, presumably for a Forge Fast Expand, although he might go Forge Gateway, depending on how aggressive EG.IdrA wants to be. But EG.IdrA is opening up pretty standard. Looks as though he might be going for a standard pool timing instead of going for a 10 pool. But the Overlord is going to be Scout. There's no Drone Scout for EG.IdrA yet, though. So EG.IdrA is going to be a little bit in the dark, but they probably know each other's playstyles fairly well, given that they play on a regular basis, as I mentioned earlier. And the probe from Minigun is going to be coming in here and seeing that there's no gas and no pool as of yet. So EG.IdrA going for a slightly later pool than most, and there it is. The probe just managing to block it a tiny bit, which will be a bit of an annoyance to EG.IdrA. But there has been no forge as of yet, and Minigun looks as though he's going to go for a Nexus first, actually, seeing that there was a bit of a late pool, so he can safely expand without the threat of Lings knocking on his door immediately. And he is hovering quite a bit of mineral, so we will be seeing the Nexus go down fairly shortly. Still no gases started for either players, so probably going to be sticking on lower end tech, not rushing up to Stargate play for Minigun, and not going for early speed. And EG.IdrA, there is the hatchery going down at the natural expansion, and there is the forge, and the Overlord will see it and know that it's slightly later than normal, because you can tell that the Protoss structures have different animations depending on where in what stage of building they are in. But I think Minigun did see the... Yes, he did see the hatchery. So he knows that it's going to be a fairly macro-orientated game, at least for the first part. And there's the gateway as well. So cannon is going to be placed down, and there's quite a big gap there. So if there were lings, they could easily run through there, obviously. But presumably it's going to be blocked off by something at a later stage. But here are the two scouting lings coming up in addition to the Overlord. I doubt that they'll get much done because the cannon will finish in time. But they are going to be a bit of an annoyance to the probe as it tries to juke them and hopefully get out alive. But the second Overlord is going to come across and see if it can find anything in the main base of intrigue. Double gas has come down for Minigun. This is probably so he can get warp gate and a sentry out at pretty much the same time. Warp gate research, should I say, and a sentry out at the same time. Or maybe he will go for Stalker instead, but the gas gives you the extra option if you need it. And looks as though the probe might go down eventually, but lings don't have speed yet, and IdrA's third base is about 80% of the way complete. So definitely going to be a more macro orientated game. EG.IdrA currently on 2 gas, so he will possibly be going for Spire Tech with the new muters. I doubt that we'll be seeing Broodlord Infester, given that it's basically been, well, not really nerfed into redundancy, but there's so much that Protoss can do to counter it now, with carriers having the changes that they've had to them so that you can micro them better, or more like you could in Brood War, and the Tempest are able to basically tear through them from a mile away if you have any form of detection, which an observer can easily provide. And amongst a swarm of Broodlords, it will be pretty easy to see. But there's a pylon going up at the back, possibly to put a couple of cannons down here to avoid Mutalisks. But they're double gas coming up at the expansion as well for Minigun. So may actually be transitioning into Stargate tech or Templar possibly. So going for higher tech route, and ling speed is on the way for EG.IdrA. So we are going to be seeing +1 upgrades, and there's the Mama Core for Minigun. And I think that Minigun is going to go for a tiny bit of early pressure into the third. And he does know that the third is there, so looks though he's going to do a bit of Stalker Zealot pressure with the Mothership Core to just give it a bit more potency, and the probe is there to drop down the forward pylon, hopefully. So we can back up quite easily. At the moment, we do have only 1 gateway for Minigun, so reinforcement's not going to be all that fast, but EG.IdrA is going to have probably enough to counter it, I'd say, because 14 lings will most of the time be a Stalker, a Zealot, and a probe. But EG.IdrA doesn't actually see the pylon, which could be a slight problem, but I think that the lings should be able to clean this up. The Queen is beginning to focus down the Mothership Core, and yes, EG.IdrA will definitely start to focus down the pylon. Send some of his lings as well. The pylon should get cancelled. Minigun doesn't actually let the pylon cancel. Doesn't actually lets the pylon finish, should I say. And there's the mass recall, but it only saved the Mothership Core, and that could have floated on out of there, because I think Mothership Cores are faster than Queens. And here's a gateway follow-up, and the Robo are actually going to be morphing in an Observer. So 3-gate Robo is, by the looks of it, what it is. And yeah, it's going to be 4-gate Robo. Yes, there are 4 gates. I was misreading my UI. But there is going to be the threat of Immortals if EG.IdrA decides to go for Roaches. And I don't think he has a Roach Warren. No, there's a Macro Hatch going up. And a Hydralisk Den at the natural. So presumably he is going to go for a Roach Hydra. But the Robo will be pretty good for defending that, because Colossi are pretty good against Hydras unless there are Vipers there to back them up. But the Mothership Core is going to fend off the Zerglings from Minigun's third, and a warping of Zealots should ensure that it's secure. The wall off at the natural is pretty safe. The cannon is going to do quite a lot of damage to all the Zerglings should they want to do that, but the warp prism is going to be spotted by the Overlord, and will IdrA act on it? I know